The morning sky over Tokyo burns red on April 7th, 1945. Captain Masao Swanaga pulls tight on his leather gloves inside the cramped cockpit of his Ki-84 Hayate fighter, the pride of the Imperial Japanese Army Air Force, at Chofu Airfield, just west of the capital. The ground shakes with the familiar thunder of American B-29 bombers pushing in from the south. Swanaga has lived with this sound for months, but today something feels different. His radio comes alive with bursts of static and tense voices. Ground control reports strange fighters approaching from the southeast. Silver planes. Unknown types. Swanaga frowns. Southeast? That cannot be. The nearest American base is Saipan, more than 600 miles away. No fighter in the world has ever reached Tokyo from such a distance. It is impossible. The 28-year-old officer has been at war for 3 years. He has faced every American machine thrown into the Pacific, the twin-boomed P-38 Lightning, the rugged F-6F Hellcat, even the tough F-4U Corsair. But always in places close to enemy carriers or islands. Over Japan itself, he has always fought with the upper hand. Here, so far from enemy runways, Japanese pilots were supposed to be safe. Sergeant Yamamoto, his ground crew chief, slams a fist on the side of the cockpit. Captain, scramble! Unknown fighters heading straight for Tokyo. Swanaga's pulse quickens. From the south? From where, exactly? His mind races. The Americans did take Iwo Jima 5 weeks ago, but that is still more than 600 miles away. No single-engine fighter can travel that far, fight and return. It breaks every law of design. His Hayate's Nakajima engine growls to life, vibrating through his chest. Swanaga peers upward and sees a flash of silver glinting against the sun. Not the dark shapes of carrier fighters. Something else. Something sleek. Something that should not exist. All units scramble immediately. The command shouts through his headset. Unidentified fighters now over Tokyo. He pushes the throttle forward. The Hayate roars down the strip, tires rattling against the concrete before lifting into the air. At 15,000 feet, the city lies below, and the silver intruders are closing fast. In all his years of flying, Swanaga has never heard such panic in ground control's voice. He grips the stick tighter. His stomach twists into a hard knot. For the first time, he feels not anger but dread. As he climbs into position, one thought drills into his mind. How could American fighters cross the ocean and appear over Tokyo? What Swanaga cannot know, what no Japanese airman can yet imagine, is that he is about to see the future of air war with his own eyes. Those silver shapes are not ordinary machines. They are proof that distance is no shield, that the ocean no longer protects the empire. The P-51 Mustang has arrived. And with it, the very long-range missions that will break Japan's skies have just begun. To understand the shock racing through Captain Swanaga's veins, you first need to know what Japanese pilots believed about fighter planes in April 1945. Every single fighter they had ever faced followed the same unbreakable rules of physics. More range always meant less power. More fuel always meant fewer guns. Longer missions always ended with fragile planes limping home on empty tanks. The Japanese themselves had lived this truth. Their legendary A6M-0 gained its incredible range by giving up armor, pilot protection, and self-sealing fuel tanks. Yes, it could fly farther than anything else in its time, but one accurate burst from an American gun, and it went up in flames. Pilots called it the flying coffin. American fighters had always been built around the opposite idea. They were strong, heavy, and dangerous, built to win close fights. But they could not travel far. The P-47 Thunderbolt could soak up bullets like no other, carrying 850 caliber machine guns that shredded anything in front of them. But its range was barely 300 miles. The twin-engine P-38 Lightning stretched that distance, but even then, it needed bases close to the battle. This fact gave Japan's home defense a massive edge. As long as American fighters could not reach the mainland, Japanese veterans could focus on shooting down unescorted bombers. Every B-29 crewman crossing into Japan's skies understood the truth. Once they crossed the coastline, they were on their own. Lieutenant Akira Watanabe, taking off from Haneda Airfield in his Ki-61 Haiyan, built his entire war plan on this assumption. The Americans come in fat and slow, he told his wingman only days earlier. Their fighters always turn back at the coast. That's when we strike. At 6:47 a.m., climbing through 12,000 feet with 5 others in formation, Watanabe spotted a gleam of silver below. A large group of American planes dove toward the massive Nakajima factory at Musashino, but something looked strange. These weren't bombers. They were sleek, single-engine fighters, and they flew with the calm aggression of planes operating right above their own base. "Control, this is Lightning 3. Watanabe radioed urgently. "I count 15. No 20 single-engine fighters attacking Musashino. Type unknown." The radios exploded with confused chatter. Pilots all across Tokyo reported the same impossible sight. American fighters deep over Japan, striking precision targets as if they owned the sky. Captain Tomiro Ogawa, leading the 103rd Sentai from Kosa, was no rookie. He had scored 25 kills across the Philippines, Okinawa, and dozens of defense missions. But as he closed within 1,000 yards of these mysterious silver fighters, he realized he was staring at something completely new. The aircraft were beautiful in a deadly way. Smooth lines, perfect balance, elliptical wings like the British Spitfire, but with a longer, sharper nose. Most alarming of all, they carried huge external fuel tanks under their wings. Yet they maneuvered with the speed and sharpness of planes at the beginning of a mission, not the desperate end. "Impossible," Ogawa whispered into his oxygen mask. Those tanks should have been dry long ago. What he didn't realize was that he was witnessing a revolution. These planes were the P-51D Mustangs, a fusion of American airframes and British Merlin engines, engineered for impossible range. They had just flown over 675 miles from Iwo Jima, fought their way to Tokyo, and still carried enough fuel to make the return trip. The Mustang's design made it unlike anything Japan had imagined. With 184 gallons inside its fuselage, 2 more 108-gallon drop tanks, and a Rolls-Royce Merlin engine sipping fuel with remarkable efficiency, the P-51 could do what no fighter in history had ever done. It could fight 850 miles from base and fight hard. Flight Sergeant Kenji Nakamura, diving his Ki-84 into the fight, felt his entire world collapse. If these Americans could reach Tokyo with such strength, then nowhere in Japan was safe, and they weren't just there to escort bombers. They were hunting. Leading one flight was Major Robert W. Moore of the 15th Fighter Group. He spotted Ogawa's Ki-84 trying to climb into the bomber stream and instantly banked to intercept. What followed was not the cautious dance of a long-range intruder trying to conserve every drop of fuel. It was something far more terrifying. A predator on the hunt, Moore's P-51D, still carrying nearly 200 gallons after the 700-mile journey, accelerated into a dive. Its Packard-built Merlin engine roared with 1,695 horsepower, driving the Mustang past 400 miles per hour. Ogawa dove hard to escape, but Moore followed with relentless precision. This was no exhausted pilot stretching his fuel. This was a hunter with time and power to spare. Watching from above, Captain Masao Swanaga realized the nightmare before his eyes. These weren't just planes. They were ghosts. They shouldn't exist, and yet here they were, flying like demons in the skies of Tokyo. At 6:58 a.m., the fight exploded in full. Swanaga saw the impossible with his own eyes. The Americans dropping their fuel tanks, not because they were empty, but because they wanted to fight lighter. Tanks that should have been bone dry were being tossed aside, with gallons still sloshing inside. "That's impossible," Swanaga gasped into his mask. But it was real. Behind him, Moore's Mustang followed with ease, burning fuel like it was endless. For Japanese pilots, this defied all logic. Long-range fighters were supposed to play defense, to stretch every drop of gas just to survive the trip home. But the Americans were fighting like they had just taken off. "This is insane," Swanaga breathed into his radio as he yanked his Ki-84 into a climbing turn, pulling 5 Gs to stay alive. How much fuel do these aircraft carry? What he didn't know was staggering. Moore's P-51 had left Iwo Jima with over 400 gallons of fuel, more than twice what any Japanese pilot had ever seen inside a single-engine plane. Even after a 675-mile flight across the Pacific, the Mustang still had 200 gallons left. Enough for an hour of brutal combat and the long journey back. 3 miles away, Lieutenant Watanabe found himself in an even worse position. 2 Mustangs locked onto him at once, attacking in perfect coordination. Their movements weren't desperate. They were sharp, precise, like hunters circling prey. "Control, this is Lightning 3, Watanabe cried over the radio. "These fighters, they're not running. They're not conserving fuel. How is this possible?" Captain John B. Hampshire of the 506th Fighter Group heard the same panic in his enemy's voices. Speaking calmly to his wingman, Lieutenant Robert Carr, he explained the truth that no Japanese pilot wanted to believe. "They don't understand, do they?" Hampshire said, "We can stay and fight. We can hunt. We can reach anywhere in their empire and still make it home." The psychological shock was immediate. For years, Japanese pilots had counted on one rule. American fighters would always turn back at the coast. That rule was now shattered. Watanabe, his Ki-61 riddled with 50 caliber hits, made a fatal mistake. Believing the Mustangs must finally be running out of gas, he tried to outlast them. But Hampshire, flying with full confidence in his Mustang's endurance, pressed closer. With cool precision, he fired a burst that tore through the Kawasaki's engine. Flames and smoke filled the cockpit. Watanabe's final transmission echoed across Tokyo's radios. "They're not leaving. They're not running out of fuel." How did they get here? Meanwhile, Captain Tomojiro Ogawa, one of Japan's best, found himself locked in a desperate duel with Major Moore above the burning Nakajima plant. For 3 full minutes, an eternity in aerial combat, the 2 fighters twisted and dove through clouds of smoke and tracer fire. Ogawa's Ki-84 Hayate was no weak machine. On paper, it could climb faster and turn sharper than the Mustang. But theory meant nothing against what Moore had. This wasn't just a fighter, it was a weapon of strategy, built to cross oceans and still fight like it was born for dogfights. In a bold move, Moore suddenly dove from 15,000 feet down to 8,000, trading altitude for speed. Any long-range pilot would normally cling to every drop of fuel. But Moore spent it recklessly, with the confidence of a man who knew he had hours left in his tanks. Ogawa followed, but instantly realized the trap. At high speed, the Mustang handled like no Japanese plane could. Moore snapped into a climbing left turn, bringing his 6 synchronized 50 caliber guns onto Ogawa's path. Bullets ripped into the Ki-84's left wing, smashing through its fuel tank. Fire spread across the fuselage. Ogawa's last thought as his fighter spiraled toward Tokyo captured the truth. If they can come this far, if they can fight this long, we have already lost the war. By 7:14 a.m., just 16 minutes after the battle began, it was over. 7 Japanese fighters were destroyed. Only 2 Mustangs had taken damage, and both would survive the 350-mile round trip. As the Americans reformed, still holding enough fuel for nearly 3 more hours of flying, Japanese ground control filled the airwaves with panic. "All units, report status. How many American fighters remain? Are they heading back to carriers?" "Negative," came the answer. "There are no carriers within 500 miles. Then, where are they going?" Flight Sergeant Kenji Nakamura, one of the lucky few who survived, later wrote the truth in his diary. "Today, I saw the future of air warfare, and it terrifies me. If the Americans can send fighters anywhere in our empire with fuel to spare, then nowhere is safe. The homeland is no longer protected by distance. The age of American air supremacy has begun. For Swanaga, there would be no return." Weeks later, farmers found the wreck of his Ki-84 in a rice field outside Tokyo. Its fuel tanks were bone dry. A single .50 caliber bullet through his chest had ended him long before the crash. His broken fighter became a grim symbol of Japan's changed reality. The impossible had become routine. American fighters now owned the skies. The psychological blow from that first mission spread like shockwaves. For 3 years, Japanese defense relied on the certainty that American fighters would always run out of fuel. That certainty was now gone forever. Within days, Japan's air strategy collapsed into confusion. Mustangs with a combat range of 1,650 miles could reach any target across the empire and still come back. Geography, once Japan's shield, was now worthless. The numbers told the story. Between April 7th and August 15th, 1945, P-51s flew 51 of these very long-range missions to the home islands. They averaged 350 miles per trip. They destroyed 341 Japanese aircraft for the loss of only 62 Mustangs. But the deeper wound was not measured in planes. It was measured in the collapse of spirit. Master Sergeant Isamu Sasaki, with 38 victories to his name, remembered it clearly. After April 1945, we stopped believing we could win. If the Americans could send fighters from Iwo Jima to Tokyo with fuel to spare, what else could they do? Where could we hide? The P-51 Mustang had done more than just win battles. It had broken the Japanese way of thinking. Japanese pilots who had spent years exploiting the fuel limits of American fighters now faced a nightmare. They were outranged, outgunned and hunted even over their own homeland. Captain Ogawa's last words, recorded by ground control before his Ki-84 plunged into Tokyo Bay, became a grim prophecy. If they can come this far, we have already lost the war. He was right. The Mustang's range changed everything. No factory was safe. No airfield could rest. Japan's once secure industrial heartland, shielded by vast stretches of ocean, suddenly lay wide open to precision attacks. The Japanese tried to adapt, but every change only revealed their desperation. By summer 1945, experienced men like Warrant Officer Kenji Fujioto were no longer chasing dogfights. They were ramming B-29 superfortresses in suicide attacks. Not from ancient samurai honor, but from cold truth. Traditional tactics were useless. The Americans could appear anywhere, with fuel to fight as long as they wished. The statistics told the story. Between April and August, P-51 Mustangs flew mission after mission, round trips averaging more than 1,300 miles. They claimed hundreds of enemy aircraft, but the true damage was not counted in wrecks. It was in morale. One veteran later admitted, "After April, we no longer believed in victory. When a single-engine fighter can fly across an ocean, attack us, and still come home with fuel, then all distance is meaningless." What made the Mustang so devastating was not just its guns, its engine, or its beauty in the air. It was what it represented, the merging of technology and strategy. With the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, streamlined design, and massive fuel capacity, the P-51 had become more than a fighter. It was a symbol of inevitability. The Japanese command struggled to understand what had happened. For 3 years, their pilots had written their battle plans around one certainty: American fighters must turn back before reaching the mainland. That belief collapsed in a single morning over Tokyo. The shock was not tactical. It was psychological. Flight Sergeant Nakamura captured it in his diary. "We spent 3 years training to fight an enemy that always turned away. Now they come and go as they please. They hunt us like rabbits in our own sky. Even the most advanced Japanese planes could not turn the tide." The Ki-84 Hayate was fast. The Ki-61 Haiyan was agile. But none of them could fight a machine that could cross 1,600 miles, strike at will, and still maneuver like a short-range interceptor. The P-51D did not only escort bombers, it led the way. It attacked airfields, strafed trains, and hunted anything that moved. By stripping away Japan's last shield, distance, it exposed the empire to the full reach of American power. Every Japanese pilot who faced the Mustang felt the same hopeless truth. Their homeland was no longer defended by geography. The ocean, once their wall of protection, had turned into an open road for American steel. The impact of that April mission never faded. Modern military historians still point to those very long-range flights from Iwo Jima as turning points in the Pacific War. They proved that endurance and reach could matter more than numbers. They showed that with the right combination of technology and training, even the impossible becomes ordinary. By August 1945, the skies over Japan belonged entirely to the Silver Mustangs. They escorted bombers straight to Tokyo, strafed enemy positions, and destroyed factories once thought untouchable. Every mission hammered home the same truth. Japan had no defense left. Master Sergeant Isamu Sasaki remembered it bitterly. After April, we knew the war was lost. Not because of bombs, not because of numbers, but because the Americans had taken away our last weapon, the distance we believed would always save us. That was the Mustang's true victory. It didn't just break airplanes, it broke a nation's will to fight. Today, the P-51 Mustang is remembered not just as a beautiful aircraft, but as a symbol of how innovation changes history. Its range, speed, and efficiency redefined aerial warfare. With it, the Americans did what every Japanese pilot once swore was impossible. They crossed the ocean, fought with power to spare, and returned home. On April 7, 1945, over Tokyo, the old rules of war died. Pilots like Suwanaga, Ogawa, and Watanabe discovered the truth in fire and smoke. The impossible had arrived on silver wings, and the Empire's skies would never again be theirs. In the end, the Mustang proved something greater than military strength. It proved that with engineering genius and relentless will, even the most unthinkable limits can be broken. What once seemed beyond reach became not only possible, but inevitable. The morning sky over Tokyo burns red on April 7, 1945. Captain Masao Suwanaga pulls tight on his leather gloves inside the cramped cockpit of his Ki-84 Hayate fighter, the pride of the Imperial Japanese Army Air Force. At Chofu Airfield, just west of the capital, the ground shakes with the familiar thunder of American B-29 bombers pushing in from the south. Suwanaga has lived with this sound for months, but today something feels different. His radio comes alive with bursts of static and tense voices. Ground control reports strange fighters approaching from the southeast. Silver planes, unknown types. Suwanaga frowns. Southeast? That cannot be. The nearest American base is Saipan, more than 600 miles away. No fighter in the world has ever reached Tokyo from such a distance. It is impossible. The 28-year-old officer has been at war for 3 years. He has faced every American machine thrown into the Pacific. The twin-boomed P-38 Lightning, the rugged F-6F Hellcat, even the tough F-4U Corsair, but always in places close to enemy carriers or islands. Over Japan itself, he has always fought with the upper hand. Here, so far from enemy runways, Japanese pilots were supposed to be safe. Sergeant Yamamoto, his ground crew chief, slams a fist on the side of the cockpit. "Captain, scramble!" Unknown fighters heading straight for Tokyo. Suwanaga's pulse quickens. From the south. From where exactly? His mind races. The Americans did take Iwo Jima 5 weeks ago, but that is still more than 600 miles away. No single-engine fighter can travel that far, fight and return. It breaks every law of design. His Hayate's Nakajima engine growls to life, vibrating through his chest. Suwanaga peers upward and sees a flash of silver glinting against the sun. Not the dark shapes of carrier fighters. Something else, something sleek, something that should not exist. All units scramble immediately. The command shouts through his headset. "Unidentified fighters now over Tokyo." He pushes the throttle forward. The Hayate roars down the strip, tires rattling against the concrete before lifting into the air. At 15,000 feet, the city lies below, and the silver intruders are closing fast. In all his years of flying, Swanaga has never heard such panic in ground control's voice. He grips the stick tighter, his stomach twists into a hard knot. For the first time, he feels not anger but dread. As he climbs into position, one thought drills into his mind. How could American fighters cross the ocean and appear over Tokyo? What Swanaga cannot know, what no Japanese airman can yet imagine, is that he is about to see the future of air war with his own eyes. Those silver shapes are not ordinary machines. They are proof that distance is no shield, that the ocean no longer protects the empire. The P-51 Mustang has arrived, and with it, the very long-range missions that will break Japan's skies have just begun.